Hello everyone and welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us on the show. I am Bosin This Business Incorporated at this time here on Channels Television. Let's bring you what is trending right now. One of the world's top rating agency, Moody's, has caused its oil outlook for 2016 by 17%. Oil prices now trading higher, 1.2% for the U.S. oil, and that is what is making news. Now let's get the program started. Asian stock market in the red today, cautious ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve two-day meeting that is currently underway early morning hours in the United States. Meanwhile, the recovery of the oil price continue. We look at the commodities market and we focus on the price of oil ahead of the FOMC meeting. Plus, a consortium of 3 international financial investors injecting $100 million into Egypt's largest payment network, Fori. Now let's get started. A cautious trade in the markets were red in Asia. Right now they were green in Europe and also green at a pre-open in the United States. Oil prices recovering slightly, and the U.S. Federal Reserve prepares for its two-day meeting, which starts later today. The U.S. Central Bank is widely expected to raise interest rates for the first time since June 2006. Brent crude closed at $37.75 after falling below $36.40 a barrel. That's the lowest level in 7 years. U.S. crude, NYMEX, however, added 1.7% to close yesterday at $36.23 a barrel. In today, across the markets in Asia, Japan, the Nikkei 225, that's the benchmark index for the Japanese market, opened flat, but later down 1% at 18,691. The index fell as much as 3% on Monday. Elsewhere within the Asia-Pacific region, Australia seen a budget deficit that will widen in 2016-2017. The S&P ASX index was up 0.24% at 4,940, boosted slightly by some of the country's listed lenders. Westpac shares were up 0.5%. Meanwhile, the Commonwealth Bank shares were up 0.3%. Australian shares ended down for the 5th consecutive day, weighed down by concerns about global oversupply of oil. Meanwhile, South Korea's benchmark stock index, the Kospi, was flat, down 0.03% at 1,927. Now we're midday in Europe. We're looking at some of the biggest news out of the European markets this Tuesday, the 15th of December. Sanofi, the healthcare company, was in the news, as well as Aviva in the UK, and the electric company called Schneider Electric in France. Quite a lot to talk about, including the German embattled automaker Volkswagen. Let's start this round of understanding the European markets and the bigger picture. My colleague with DWTV financial correspondent Conrad Boston is there in Frankfurt at the stock exchange and is live to us right now. Let's bring him in and start the conversation from the corporate end and quarterly earnings for Q4, expectations from European companies. Dialog, the semiconductor company, caught its fourth quarter expectation. Meanwhile, Schneider Electric, healthcare giant Sanofi of France, also in the news this Tuesday. Conrad, thanks for coming in. Give us more insight into these and other company news making the headlines from your trading floor.
Hi Bausen, hi Lagos. Let me start off with the stories that caused the biggest bloodshed in terms of what happened to the stock prices of some of the companies you mentioned. Shares of Dialog Semiconductor lost 7% today due to the news that Dialog expects lower earnings and lower sales, and this despite the fact that this supplier of the computer company Apple made good business with Apple. And remember the high sales numbers of iPods and iPads we've seen. Dialog cannot really profit from this. This profit warning came at a very negative moment of time, at a very inappropriate moment of time for Dialog as well. The company recently launched a takeover bid for the American competitor Atmel, and recently a counteroffer of an unknown a bidder came on the market for this company, Atmel, as well. So this means that potentially Dialog will have to offer a higher price for Atmel, and this at a time where earnings and sales look bad. What's more, there are analysts who predict peak iPhone to happen next year, which means these analysts predict that iPhone sales will decline by as much as 2.9% next year, and that's of course not good news for suppliers to Apple like Dialog Semiconductor. Shares in the British software firm Aveva today down about 1/3. They are losing 33% roundabout, and behind this is that Schneider Electric, you mentioned the company, it's calling off the planned takeover of Aveva. The due diligence process showed information that Schneider didn't like. Schneider says that an integration of Aveva would become too costly and too risky. That news is of course very negative for Aveva shareholders. Now let me talk about positive mergers and acquisitions. You mentioned Sanofi Aventis. Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a large German pharmaceutical company, it's not listed here at the stock exchange but family owned. It is planning an asset swap with Sanofi Aventis, the large French pharmaceutical company. Boehringer is to get Sanofi's animal health business, while Sanofi is to get Boehringer's consumer health business, plus a cash payment of 4.5 billion euros roundabout. Extremely positive news. The shareholders of Sanofi think the share price of this company is up round about 5% today.
Conrad, let's stick with the corporate news. So let's drive around a little bit. Drive us around the European auto market a little bit. You understand the charade there. Talk to us about Volkswagen losing its leadership position. What's the 2015 auto market in Europe so far? Is there anything we can drive or anything driving us into 2016?
Well, I have to tell you, the market continues to be on a path of recovery. In November, car sales here in the European Union increased 13.7% year-on-year. That's the second best year-on-year result this year, 2015. Volkswagen makes a bit of an exception. The Volkswagen Group only managed to increase sales year-on-year by 4.1% in November, which also means that Volkswagen Group lost some market share, 2 percentage points. The market share is now 24.3%. Now, is this really bad news for Volkswagen? It is, of course, if you take into consideration the benchmark that Volkswagen itself had in mind until the emissions scandal happened. Volkswagen had planned to become the #1 car maker of the world in terms of sales, and this of course is becoming difficult now with market share declining. But I think it's also not so bad news if you take into consideration that the emissions scandal happened. I think that clients of Volkswagen have remained surprisingly faithful. The decline of market share was not so big. Of course, this is only a snapshot. Now we have to see what happens during the next few months, how car sales which will look like during the next few months. For the moment, the evaluation on the market is pretty positive. Car makers' shares, including Volkswagen, are all on the upside today. The German DAX, as you can see right behind me, can rise significantly again. This also has to do with very positive economic data from the Eurozone. Industrial production came in better in October than economists had forecast. There has been a rebound.
Yeah, it looks like the European economic data there, looks like, they're not going to take the UK's inflation headline reading into any consideration, 0.1%. That looks like not really significant. Even the FTSE is about 2% higher, FTSE 100. It's about 2% higher as we speak. So, looks like, well, either way, it's a positive day ahead of FOMC tomorrow for the European markets.
Absolutely. I mean, looking at this inflation data from the UK, it's very good news, of course, that Britain has edged out of deflation last month. And the very slow inflation, of course, indicates that probably markets do not have to reckon with rising interest rates in the United Kingdom soon, despite the fact that there are a few Bank of England governors who think that the Bank of England should take care and not, start rising rates too late. At a speech yesterday, one of the deputy governors of the Bank of England, Minouche Shafik, said once wage growth in the UK has returned at levels consistent with inflation returning to target, she would expect the economy to warrant an increase of bank rates to happen more quickly than anticipated at the moment. So what does this mean? It means that investors, of course, should not feel too safe. Eventually, the Bank of England will follow the path that is expected tomorrow from the Federal Reserve. As you know, the market is expecting interest rates to rise in the United States for the first time in 9 years tomorrow.
Yes, Conrad, it's still going to be breakfast time this time tomorrow afternoon when we're having a conversation. It's going to be about 8 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. So we're all going to have our breakfast, a cup of coffee, then wait on Janet Yellen in 24 hours' time. See you tomorrow. Conrad Boson, DWTV financial correspondent for Channels Television, live to us at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Let's come back after the break. We'll take a bit of a look into the countdown to the U.S. FOMC meeting.